Okay, I want to start right at the most important thing that we're talking about today. And I'd love for you to share with us when the Enneagram came into your life, what was happening in your life, like give us the background, like the context. And did you find it or did it find you?
Such a good question. Thank you. It came into my life when I was 29 years old.
Okay.
And I would say it found me. My mom actually invited me to an Enneagram workshop in New Orleans. I was living in New York at the time.
Okay.
And I really wanted to find the love of my life, but I had had a lot of bad relationships,
Hmm.
people that I would chase and put on pedestals and worship and kind of abandon myself for, and then they would not be what I wanted them to be because that's how it worked out, right?
Yeah.
And then I would entertain these romantic relationships where someone would put me on a pedestal, and I entertained that for 3 months, and then I would move back to chasing a guy.
Yeah.
So the 2 things that I was working on at that time were I wanna meet the love of my life and I want to be a successful actress. And neither of those things were working out, and I felt like I was the problem, and I was beating myself up and trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Why wasn't I able to manifest these dreams?
Yeah.
And then when I went to the Enneagram workshop, that's when I figured out what my type was, and it was like everything became crystal clear
Yeah.
as to why I was having the problems I was having and what I needed to do to change.
Did you feel like you recognized your type right away?
No, I thought I was your type.
I remember this about meeting you because I didn't recognize myself right away, and I actually think
Yeah.
that's one of the tricky things about working with the Enneagram, in my experience of bringing it to coaching clients. It
Mhm.
can be hard to find your type, and I've had a couple other clients who are really into the Enneagram who also came to our relationship having been mistyped. Either they mistyped themselves or they were not kind of clicking with it as a
Right.
tool in some
Mhm.
other, experience that they had had. So yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, and actually the Enneagram there was a few years prior to that where my mom had brought a Wisdom of the Enneagram book to a family vacation, and I had done the test and I came out as a 3, and I did think I was a type 3 first because
Okay.
in high school I was a performer, I'm an actor. Then at this workshop I thought I was a type 2 because relationships are very important to me. I
Yeah.
was very like a people pleasing, giving, helper mode. And I kind of serve that role within my family.
Yeah.
So I did the entire weekend workshop thinking I was a type 2. But here's what made me realize that maybe I wasn't a 2. When I was on the 2 panel, because that's how you did it in this workshop, is you're sitting on a panel with other people who are your same type and you're talking about your experience and how you see the world. And usually everyone's like nodding their head, like, yes, yes, this is how we see the world.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to talk the whole time and choose like you are very deferential and like, "You please, you talk." And I
Yeah.
kept being like, "I'll take the mic." So that was one difference that I was like, "I'm a lot more selfish than the rest of these twos."
Yeah.
And then when I was in the audience watching the fours, they all had something unique on that they were wearing.
Yes.
They were wearing, like, contrast black and white with, like, pops of rust red and mustard yellow, and I looked down and I was wearing a black and white with pops of red and yellow outfit, and I'm like, "Are these my people?"
Yes. I
And
love
then
it.
I read the paragraph in the Essential Enneagram
Uh-huh.
about the type 4, and that's when I realized, "Oh, yes, this is who I
And
am."
were you still at the workshop or had you
I
left the
was
whole?
I was still at the
Okay.
workshop,
So
and
you got,
I told my teacher, Sandra, I was like, "I think I might not be," and she was like, "Just read this paragraph," and I
yeah.
did, and it described the push-pull pattern that I was seeing in my relationships in that paragraph, and I
Yeah.
realized that it was a pattern that I was playing into that was just a habitual subconscious pattern, and that if I wanted to meet the love of my life, then I would have to let go of that
Yeah.
pattern,
Yeah.
and 6 months later, I met my
Oh,
husband.
I love it. I love it. And as you're telling that story, I remember that my mom was the one who introduced me to the Enneagram. And both of our moms are nines. And
Yes.
she had gone to a continuing education course with a couple of her friends who had also become therapists as a second career. That's what they had all done together, like in
Mm.
their late
Mhm.
40s. and she's always learning and she's always up for, different experiences. And they were driving to Baton Rouge. I was in the dining room in New Orleans, my parents' home, and I was in my late 30s. And she's like, "Oh, I'm going to Baton Rouge to do this continuing ed thing about this self-awareness tool, like personality assessment." I don't even think she really knew what it was. And I
Oh
remember
my
her
gosh.
calling me afterwards, and I had just quit my job as a preschool teacher, and I was in this interim,
Mm.
like, I think I wanna do coaching because 'cause I'd been doing it, out of my living room here and there. And she said, "If you really wanna do this, why don't I give this to you for your birthday?" And she gave
Mm.
me the Enneagram workshop where you and I met in North Carolina.
Oh my
Isn't that
gosh.
cool?
I
Yeah.
love
God
that.
bless our moms.
Thanks to our
So
mamas.
good, yeah. So let's go back for the listener who maybe is new to the Enneagram, maybe they've heard about it, but I don't wanna go in too much depth about each type. But I really
Mhm,
do want people to listen out for themselves in these descriptions that you can give us of the 9 types.
mhm,
Listen out for your loved
mhm,
ones and just start to open up to this idea that there is a way of looking at the world, and that's what the Enneagram introduces us to, these 9
mhm,
ways of looking at the
mhm.
world, and the premise is that we really do have one that is the most guiding for us or the most defining for us. So tell us, like,
Mhm,
what it is in your own words, and if you
mhm.
can run through the 9 types, and maybe we can ping pong back and forth examples of those so people
Great.
can find themselves.
So it is a personality system, and
Yeah,
Enneagram means 9 and Gram means a figure drawn. So it's a 9-pointed star, and each point on the star is a different personality type. So it
okay,
represents how you see the world and then what your habitual patterns are of
okay.
thinking, feeling, and doing. So your personality. And those patterns are subconscious because you develop them in childhood and then they just become who you believe yourself to be.
Yeah,
It also offers a path to growth because it makes the subconscious conscious. So then you have a choice, like I did,
yeah,
like, oh, okay, I can keep repeating the pattern of the push pull and the romantic, or I can actually see that there's a different way. And
yes,
so a lot of people don't realize that there's another way to see the
yeah,
world because our view is so myopic. We're like, "What do you mean there's a different way of seeing something?"
yes,
But it's almost like if you looked at a pie and you cut it into 9 different slivers, we only see 1/9 of the whole
yeah,
picture. I have a really holistic and glass half full perspective of the type. Some people feel like they're boxed in by a
yeah,
type, but it shows you this is how you see the world, and there are gifts to how you see the world and how you show up,
yeah,
and you teach the rest of us that. And then there are blind spots and ways that you get blocked, and the other types can show you what you're not seeing.
yes. I'm the same way,
So,
Liz,
yeah.
because I approach it the same way you do. I love that glass half full
Mhm.
because I
Mhm.
think some people interact with it like, "Oh, this is my type," and stop there with the work. Like, "Well,
Mhm.
I'm just" for me, I'm a 2, as you know, so it's like, "Oh, I'm just a giver. I put my
Mhm.
needs last."
Mm.
But I really like using the language, the 4 in me or the 8
Mm.
in me, so
Mhm.
it's like understanding that you have this specific way of seeing the world and it's a gift, but you have a little bit of all of the types in you. The more that you get to respect and appreciate and become aware of the other types,
Mhm.
the more free you are to be out of your type, out of the fixed box of your way of kind of coping and being in the world.
Exactly. Because like with shadow work, we have all potentials within us.
Yeah.
It's just that we are more practiced in being one way.
Yeah. So take us around the star. Which type do you like to begin with for description?
Let's start with the type 2 because
Mhm.
there are 3 different centers that the 3 types are within.
Okay.
And we'll start with the heart types. These are relationship oriented types. And what they really want in the world is love, connection, and validation. And then
Yeah.
they do it in 3 different ways. So, our type 2, which is your Enneagram type, so
Yes.
you're going to be able to speak a lot
Amen.
more
Yeah.
to this type, is called the giver or the
Okay.
helper.
Okay.
And the way that they get love in their life is by being needed and by
Yeah.
being helpful and taking care of other people's needs. So that's what's on their filter when they look out in the world is how can I build relationships? How can I help other people? How can I offer my services to them?
Yeah.
The next type is a type 3, and the way they get love is by performing at a high level, by being success oriented, achievement oriented, getting tasks done. Isn't Boyd a 3?
Boyd is a 3, and I have to tell you, the first episode of I'll Meet You There is a conversation with Boyd, and it's about
Mhm.
creativity. It is also a conversation between an Enneagram Type 2 and an Enneagram Type 3. So, when we were talking about his creative process, as a 3, his ability to put blinders on and
Mm.
make himself do something. You know, he
Mhm.
does not get distracted and going down into these rabbit holes about what somebody needs from him or even how someone is going to receive his creation. You know, as a
Mhm.
2, not only am I interrupted easily by a dog, a child, anything the house needs, I'm also interrupted by my own inner thoughts of if I'm writing, and I'm often writing nonfiction,
Mhm.
how is the reader going to perceive this? And I'm often writing true, real stories about people I love and
Mhm.
relationships. You know,
Mhm.
no
Mhm.
surprise if you're
Mhm.
listening and you relate to this and you're a type 2, it's all relationships.
Right.
And so it was
Right.
really interesting. I thought about you because when I listened to the replay, I was like, "Oh, wow." And I knew I wanted to have you on this podcast. I'm like, Liz is gonna love this, type 2 and type 3, because you could really do the types as they relate to the creative process. Because each
Oh,
person
100%.
is living
Yeah.
through their type to create something.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
also think I don't know if you agree with this, but I also kind of feel like America is a 3.
Yes, because the American dream. So the American dream, the ability to work hard and get what you want. That's the story that's built into our bones as Americans
Yeah,
is you work hard to pursue the American dream.
yeah,
And that's what threes do really well. And
yeah,
that's who we elevate in society is the type 3, at
yeah,
least in this
interesting.
country.
Yeah, yeah,
And then the 4, I
yeah.
was gonna say, is more like France. So the
Oh,
type
I
4,
love
that's my type, and they
yeah,
are the dreamer, the romantic, and the way they get love is by being really special and being extraordinary.
yeah,
So they wanna be unique because they feel like if I am special, if I'm a diamond in the rough, then surely you will love me and I'll get that connection. So a lot of times they're artists, they stand out. That's
yeah,
part of why going back to me sitting on that panel being like, I wanted to be the special
yeah,
one. Whereas twos, they have a connection to 4, but they're also okay giving someone else the credit, letting someone else be the star
yeah.
of the show.
What
Mhm.
you said really resonated with me about the 4s that I've known and loved and 4s I've worked with. That uniqueness often comes out physically, you know, like, the beauty of your living room, like, when I walked into your house, when you guys did your
Mhm.
house uptown, no one else has that look, like, everything in your house is so you, it's so unique. The creativity of the 4 is so attractive to me, like, I just love
Mm.
that sense of individuality, romance, and creativity.
Yes, and beauty and aesthetics are
Beauty,
really
that's it.
important
Yeah,
to a 4, and it's a beauty in the eye of the beholder, that kind of definition,
yeah,
right? And so I can tell a 4 from a mile away
yeah,
because they might have lots of piercings or tattoos or
yeah,
their hair's a different color or they're wearing something that you've never, a one of a kind from a vintage store.
yes.
Yes.
I love it. So 2, 3, and 4 are all heart centers.
Heart
Heart
types.
types.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Tell us more.
Then we're gonna move on to our head types.
Okay.
And what they really want is to be secure, to be certain, to be safe,
Yeah.
and they wanna avoid or move away from fear or
Okay.
pain.
Okay.
They live in their thoughts, they live in their mind. And our first is a type 5, and they're called the observer. And the way they get security is by observing all around them, measuring their boundaries, managing what information they might need to know in order to act.
Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes is the perfect example
That's a
of a type
great
5.
example. Yes, I hadn't heard that before. That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see, like, how he zooms out. Let me
Uh,
take in the full picture
yeah.
so that I'm not leaving any stone unturned so that I can really know what I need to know in order to be safe.
Yeah.
A type 6 gets secure by being prepared. So
Mhm.
they scan for worst case scenarios, what possibly could go wrong, what could happen, and they are the survivor.
Yeah.
So There's more sixes in the world than any other type because they're the ones who know how to survive because
Yeah,
they've already examined every possible outcome and figured out how they're going to plan and
yeah,
prepare for it. And then they continue on.
yeah. They know where the exit
And
doors are. Yeah,
100%. They've got all the exit plans, exit strategies figured out. They're
yeah,
great at designing backwards, but they're also, I think they're the most misunderstood type
yeah,
because they are incredibly warm and really funny. And most of our stand up comedians are type sixes
yeah,
because they want to be safe by making people comfortable around them,
yeah,
by making people laugh. So those are our type sixes.
yeah. It's so interesting. It's great to hear these descriptions too, because it's easier sometimes to identify what you're not. You
Yes, you
know,
can do
so
process of elimination.
yeah,
Mhm.
so I'm
Mhm.
listening to a 6, and I definitely have some heady energy. I have had plenty of experiences with anxiety, but
Mhm.
it doesn't come through like that. It's not about being prepared. It's not about where the exit door is. In fact, I can be outright absent-minded. Like, where are we? Not only where I have no idea where we are, so how would I know the exit door? But it's interesting because you can immediately, for the listener who's new to this, sometimes
Mhm.
listening for the things that you know you're not can guide you to a type that kind
That's
of
right.
unlocks you. Yeah.
That and that's how I usually start if I'm doing an Enneagram typing session. I'll start by just Xing out what I know that they're not
Yes.
in order to get to what they are. But twos and sixes are what we call look-alike types.
Okay.
And so they are both relationship oriented, but what's driving that for you is love and
Yeah.
connection. And for a six, it's relationship because they're also called the loyal skeptic or the loyalist. And it's about safety. There's
Yes.
safety in numbers. As
Yes.
long as I have a friend, I won't be alone.
Yes. I love that. I've
So
all every 6 I've known is extremely loyal. Like, the loyalty comes
100%.
through
Yes.
so strongly.
Yes. Yes. And I love my six friend. My husband's a six.
Oh, you're
So
right on. That's cool.
then our last head type
Uh-huh.
is a type seven,
Okay.
and they're not going to look like a head type because they're so embodied. They're really fun. They're called the adventurer or the epicure. But the way they feel safe is by having options and by having positive possibilities.
Yeah.
So they're always looking for the shiny object. They are the people who may be in a conversation with you at a wedding, at a party,
Yeah.
and if they're not having fun, if they feel trapped,
Yeah.
that feels like pain and fear to them. They're going to go find the next fun thing to do or
Yeah.
the next fun person to talk to. Also, they use their mind in making connections and
Mhm.
almost like a highway of ideas in their head. So they're great party planners.
Yes.
They are a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of
Yeah.
startup companies come from these people who have these fast minds and can see all different possibilities.
Yeah. My friend Mark, who kind of validated the Enneagram for me, once I went to the workshop where I met you, then I started seeing it everywhere, and Mark had been working with an executive coach and is very much
Mm.
in the tech space and lives in Northern
Mhm.
California, and he was my first friend who really shared with me how powerful the Enneagram is in business. And
Mhm.
he's a 7, and he's such
Mm.
an ideation person. So,
Right.
it's like, oh, I got that 7 quickly. In fact, my dad is also a 7. So, it's like
Oh,
when you know
wow.
people well who are the type,
Mhm.
and the
Mhm.
7 to me is so fun. Like, even talking to Mark about the Enneagram is fun. Everything
Mhm.
is fun, fun, fun. And
Mhm.
my dad is like that too. It's like if we go into a little darkness or something that's stressful or painful to talk about, he will pop out of that so fast. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
just immediate hard right in the conversation. So, like, "Okay, I got it. We're not gonna go
Yes.
into the dark places. We're gonna stay with the light." We call it sunny side of the street.
I like to go deep.
Yeah,
Fours like to go deep.
yeah,
Sevens, I don't wanna say that they like to stay on the surface, but they like to enjoy what they're talking about. So if it starts to feel trapped, I start to see them, like, bristle, and then
yeah,
I'm like, "Okay, they gotta go. I gotta let them go. They've got to
yes,
be free. They have to fly." But I can see it in, like, in their body
yeah,
when they're ready to change it up.
yeah, and it's a beautiful thing to know this system because of that
Mhm.
moment you just described. You just know, okay, there's nothing to judge here. This is just the way that this person is. I can support this person. I mean, here I am. Listen to me. I sound exactly like a 2. I can support this person by letting them go.
Right.
That's what they need. But it is kind of beautiful to see somebody that way.
Yeah, because 4s take things personally,
Yeah.
and this has helped me not take it personally,
Yeah.
and that I can own the fact that I like to go deep, and I can find people like you where we
Yeah.
can go deep for as long as we want, and then I can enjoy 7s for that
Yeah.
connection and not need them to be something that they're not.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mhm.
I think it's so true what you said about a 7. It doesn't seem like it would be a head type because they're
Right.
so in their body.
Yeah, they've got
So
tons of energy.
yes, yes.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
tell us about the body types.
So the body types are interested in feeling a sense of worth,
Okay.
a sense of belonging and autonomy. So issues of power and control and like I have value in the world.
Okay.
I belong here. That's what they're interested in, and they feel angry if they don't belong or if they aren't valued for their worth.
Yeah.
And we see that in 3 different ways. So our type 8 is called the challenger or the protector or the boss. And they have more energy than any other type. They are really like a bull in a china shop. Like, I am here.
Yeah.
I am strong. And the way they secure their sense of self worth is by being direct and strong and taking action and taking up space in the world.
Yeah.
So I love type 8s because they've taught me so much about going after what I want, not apologizing for it. My best friend, Simone, who passed away, she was an 8.
Yeah.
My sister's an 8. My first Enneagram teacher was an 8. So I've really loved to just learn from them. Like, take up space.
Yes.
You deserve to be here.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I know this is a more detailed aspect of the Enneagram that we won't necessarily dig into today, but under certain circumstances, types move to other types. So
Yes.
I've learned a lot about the 8 because under stress, a type 2 can move to type 8.
Right.
And when I really dug into that and read more about it and observed myself, it was when my children were younger.
Mm.
It would be calm, calm, calm. I'm doing
Hmm.
fine. Everyone has
Hmm.
their buttered noodles. Yes, you can watch a second show. And then when I was done, it was like a switch would flip and I would go
Oh, yeah.
total 8 boss mode. Like, get out
Yes.
of my face, leave me alone, shut the
Hmm.
door, just full swing. So I think another invitation for people listening is if you want to dig into this and learn more about your type, it really helps you in that moment so you don't do the total swing
Mm.
unconsciously to this whole other
Right.
type and then you're
Right.
playing out the down shadow side of the type.
Mhm,
So I think
mhm.
with this tool, I was able to breathe through that moment and realize, well, I have a lot of choices I can make before I'm getting to the boss. Everybody
Mhm,
out of my way. I'm not vulnerable. I don't care if you know how I feel moment.
mhm,
I can make
mhm,
choices for my own self-care before I'm
mhm.
under stress and going there. So,
Yes,
yes,
and it's called a resource point, and so the lines that connect your type, there's 2 lines, and those are your resource points, and you can go to the high side of them or the low side of them. So that what you just described was the type 2 going to the low side of your stress
yes,
point. But you can also go to 8 when you're needing to take action and
yeah.
you're needing to prioritize yourself and voice your needs, and you can do it in a positive way. So that's why it's called a resource point.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for that. It
Mhm.
really is a great word for it. I
Mhm.
do feel like the 8 like you. I learned so much from 8s and the action part of an 8 is
Right.
so inspiring.
Yeah. A type 9 is next, and that's what we
Yeah,
talked about our moms are, and they are the peacemaker, and they look the least like a body type and the least angry because they're numb to their own anger. And what they really want is they want to keep the peace and keep harmony,
yeah,
and the way they feel connected in a sense of the world is in connection with other people. So this is just my image that I always have when I think of a 9, and it comes from The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. At the end, when all the Whos are holding hands
yeah.
and they realize that the Christmas spirit is just about being together, that's what I think about 9s.
Oh,
It's
I love
like they just
that.
want everybody holding hands,
Yes,
happy, peace, harmony, no conflict in
yeah.
the world. but I'm sure you've seen this with your mom, and not to call out our moms, but like a 2, like you just described, when they have been ignoring their own needs and their own priorities for so long, that's when their anger will flare up.
Yes.
Or we might see their anger more in a stubbornness and a resistance
Yes.
to moving and taking action.
Yes. That has been
Mhm.
my experience, more the
Mhm.
resistance and the repressed anger, not
Yes.
the
Yeah.
8 vocalized anger.
Exactly. Exactly. And our last type is a type 1.
Mhm.
And the way they ensure their sense of worth in the world is by being good and perfect and doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And so they have a whole set of internal standards. So, standards that they measure from their body. They can feel like in their gut, what is the right thing to do? And they're responsible and
Yeah.
they do that right thing. And their anger comes out because anger is not usually right or perfect.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times it comes out sideways in passive aggression,
Yeah.
in clenched jaw, and
Yes.
rigidity is how their anger is. It's like, it's not right.
Yeah.
So, that's our type 1 perfectionist,
Yeah.
or I call them the improver because they're really here to improve the world to make it a better
Yeah.
place. But sometimes they can be perfectionistic about it.
Yes, and I think that same thing applies to a 1 that we talked about with a 4. My
Mm,
1s are often physically well put together, and if they're not physical, you can feel their perfectionism in other ways that could be more subtle, like having the perfect situation, having the conversation go perfectly, or having the relationship go perfectly. But that,
yes.
I think that's another avenue for understanding your type is to just notice how you are in the world, how you
Mhm.
dress, what your preference is, and that was like you, I was on a panel to discover I was a 2,
Mhm.
and no
Mhm.
one on the 2 panel looks perfect. I mean,
Right.
no, I'm looking down and I'm like, "Oh, right, I forgot to put on, the matching clogs." I definitely have gone to work when I taught preschool in 2 different colored clogs. Yeah, and you're like, "Oh, wow." But who cares because I'm here to take care of children.
Exactly. And the type 1, I always think of, like, buttoned up and,
Yeah,
shirt tucked in, and my sister-in-law is a type 1. And she is the only person who sends me flowers on important events. So I appreciate it so much because
yes,
she is hardwired to do the right thing. And the right thing
yeah,
is to recognize when someone has had a big event and like write a thank you note, send them flowers, bring them a dish if they are sick.
yeah.
And then she helps me remember that. One is a four's resource point, it's my growth point.
Oh, interesting.
And that
Okay.
objectivity, that ability to, again, I mentioned that I was more self-involved than 2s. 1s can be very objective and objectively what's the right thing to do.
Yeah,
So I appreciate them for that.
yeah. When I have
Mhm.
had guidance from my 1 friends, one of the things I really appreciated is this clarity around the word that you said, standards, and I think that's
Mm.
what you're speaking to, the objectivity. As a
Mhm.
2, I can't locate myself sometimes. I don't know
Mhm.
what I want, I don't know where I
Mhm.
am,
Mhm.
and it can be exhausting because 'cause you're like, "I'm so tired, but I don't know why I'm tired. Like, who am
Mhm.
I? Where am I?" Because everybody around you is so much more prevalent in your
Right,
awareness,
right.
and I have found and leaned upon ones to
Mhm.
really guide me to that righteousness, but I don't think it's righteousness. In that moment, it is a rightness, but in a good way. It's
Mhm.
like the
Mhm.
upside of having a
Right.
standard and a clarity around having a standard. And it just goes to show that all the types are so important. It really does take
Yes.
all of these ways of showing up and being in the world for us to evolve, and for us to have
Mhm.
compassion for each other.
That is the number one word that the Enneagram has helped me have compassion for myself
Yeah.
and for other people, and truly to be able to put myself in their shoes and
Yes.
understand, oh, this is why they do what they do. I think whenever we have conflict, this tool is really helpful for conflict resolution, is we're just seeing our point of view.
Yeah.
And you're having your point of view, and we're actually having two different conversations. This helps us hear the other person
Yes.
so that we can have the same conversation.
Yeah.
And then we can agree to disagree, or we can make compromises or whatever we need to do in order to resolve the conflict. But it at least helps us get on the same playing field.
Yes. Will you take us through that moment of how do you grow from this? There you are, you know you're a 4, you're
Mhm.
confronted with that kinda ick moment. I describe it when you
Mhm.
discover your type. Oftentimes,
Mhm.
there is this moment of like, "Ooh, I'm that?
Mhm.
I can't." I
Mhm.
had that with the 2 when I sat on the panel because I didn't realize the extent of pride that's connected
Mm.
with being a 2.
Mhm.
And so to see that in myself, like the
Mhm.
arrogance
Mhm.
that I could help anyone and everyone, and someone on the panel described it as an invisible string to
Mm.
people, and I feel it
Mhm.
in the grocery store a lot. Like if anyone in the grocery store needs help, I have to tell you this funny moment that there was a man in like a motorized wheelchair, like trying to reach cereal.
Mhm.
And I was next to him, and I was so aware of the 2, and I said, "I am not gonna reach that cereal box unless I really know that he needs help." He's kinda makes eye contact with me, and he asks for help. And so then I give him the help, and he's like, I come to this grocery store, and my daughter and my wife don't think I can do this by myself, but I really wanted to come to this grocery store today, and this is what I wanna do." And he was really fierce about it. And he was
Mm.
like, "And I'm so grateful that you helped me, and, like, I'm gonna go on and do this, and I can be in
Mm.
the grocery store." And I was like, "You can be in the grocery store. You can do it." But the unaware too doesn't give that pause for people to either need
Mhm.
help or ask for help or be empowered. I've had moments where I've helped
Mm.
people who don't want my help,
Right, right.
and it undermines the whole thing, and there's
Mm.
a humility in the 2. So I guess my point is, it's hard to be aware. Like, that's one of
Mhm.
the reasons why we're not aware. But
Right,
when you do
right.
get self-aware, it really does open up how you can relate to others and how you can show up as a version of yourself that
Mhm.
invites other people to be their full selves.
Mhm.
But the growth is difficult. So take us through that moment, either with yourself or just how you see people grow through, I don't know if it's breath work, if it's
Mhm.
journaling, if it's what is it? How do we
Mhm.
get better?
One thing that's coming through for me as you're describing is I always think of a type 2 and a basketball court.
Okay.
And I think that a lot of times 2s spend most of their time in someone else's side of the court.
Yes.
And so you've left your side of the court. That's why it's hard to know who you are or what your needs are because you're on the other side of the court. And so I always try to remind my 2 clients to
Yeah.
come back to your side of the court, meet them halfway. And I love I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
Perfect title for
Yeah.
you. It's like you show up to the center court line and I will meet you there too. And you get to take care of your needs and I get to take care of mine. And I get to ask you as a 4 when I want your help. And it's a balance of give and take. And so that's the journey for a type 2
Yeah.
is realizing you're not loved just because you give and because you
Yeah.
help, because you enjoy giving. So
Yes.
you have to also receive so that you're giving the gift of giving to someone else,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the balance. That's what you're here to
Yeah.
learn.
And I
Mhm.
love that you brought that up because when I first learned about it, my type, or for a listener, if you're first learning about your type, the mind can go, well, now I can't do that. I can't give, or now I
Right.
can't in Boyd's world as a type 3. And I think that I'm sure we have a lot of type 3 listeners. It's like, well, now what am I supposed to do? Not achieve? What am I supposed to do? Not focus? That's why I felt so proud of myself with the man in the grocery store because I just paused. I just waited. I didn't jump
Mhm.
in, and then he was able to ask me. I did help him, and it made him feel good that he can get help if he
Mhm.
can't reach something, but he wants to still go to the grocery store by himself. Good for him.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I feel like this awareness, it gives you that chance to be more balanced, to the word that
Mhm.
you use, as opposed to
Mhm.
reacting like, oh, well, now in the one's mind, I
Mhm.
can't go for the standard. I can't have it be, well,
Right.
yes, you can. It's just more
Mhm.
of a balance. What in the type 1, because I think perfectionism is pretty pervasive.
Right.
What is the growth there for that person?
So for a type 1, their growth journey is about the vice to virtue
Sure.
because I think that's a
Yeah.
those are good words as, like, points on a map of how you grow. And so you talked about pride, the pride of being the one who can help that man, right? And so
Yes.
your journey is to humility and to allowing yourself to receive and the balance of give and take.
Okay.
So that's that vice to virtue journey. For a type 1, it is from anger to serenity. And
Serenity.
so
Okay.
it's about letting go of, sometimes it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, and I tell this to my type 1 friends and clients all the time. I'm like, "You are right."
Yeah.
And yet, you being right, sometimes holding on to that is causing you so much stress and that rigidity. I always feel it in my
Yeah.
shoulder. It's like, do you wanna be right or do you wanna be happy?
Yes.
Yes.
It's so good for one. Yes.
Yes, and the serenity prayer for a 1, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Letting go of what is not within your control, and because they can control so much of themselves and they wanna try to control other people, but ultimately that's a fool's errand,
Yeah.
and you have to let go and let other people make mistakes if they're going to, forgive yourself for making mistakes
Yeah.
because you're human, and that's what that journey looks like. But
Yeah.
some of what you're saying and what you're describing in that moment in the grocery store, there is a pause that comes from self-awareness, right? And you are able to give yourself that pause of your normal go-to behavior
Yeah.
and make a different choice. And that is what each type is able to do, and it's uncomfortable because our go-to response, it's automatic. We don't even think about it. We don't even realize that there is a space to have the pause. And I heard this quote, and it's one of my favorite quotes. It's by Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
And he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our
Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
In our response lies our growth and our freedom.
Yeah.
And so that's the first step, is just realizing that there is a space,
Yeah.
right? And if you can catch yourself and you can see that you're wanting to reach for it and you pause, and then you get to choose. Do I want to wait for him to ask for help, or
Yeah.
do I want to just go for it? We can look at that but for each type, but that is what the growth journey is about.
I love that. It's so true, and it's so universal.
Mhm. Mhm.
Everybody has the opportunity to pause.
Yes, and I think that's why I love the Enneagram so much, is because it shows you who you think you are,
Yes.
but also who you have the capacity to be,
Yeah.
which is greater than you believe yourself to be.
Yeah. How about for the 4?
It's envy to equanimity.
Okay.
So envy being the comparing mind and always feeling like something is missing. Going back to the being special and unique,
Yeah.
right? So the way that 4s make themselves unique is, what am I missing? What do I not have? And how can I make that special?
Yeah.
So you're always not enough or too much, and you're comparing yourself to others and what's going to make me stand out. If you saw Inside Out 2 and they added Envy
Yes.
as one of the characters, and I love her because she's like, she looks at someone like, "Oh my god, her hair is so beautiful."
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of,
Yes.
you're always like looking at other people as everyone else has it and something must be wrong with me.
Yeah.
There's a hole that I'm trying to fill. And so the journey is to realize that I am and I have everything I need. I am
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
I am whole. And equanimity is emotional balance. So it's no longer going from that push pull pattern that I've mentioned. It's about the steady waters.
Do you think fear of missing out is a type
Mm.
4?
I think for a type 4 and a type 7 and a type 9,
Yeah.
yes, fear of missing out for a type 4 is going to feel like outsiders a lot,
Okay.
like they don't belong because there's something about them that's missing.
Yeah.
For 7s, they don't want to miss out because it could possibly be really fun. So
Yeah.
they have a
Of
hard
course.
time.
Of course.
Yeah. They're like, "Oh, is it more fun over there? Is the
Yeah.
conversation more fun over there than the one I'm having right
Yeah.
now?" So they've got FOMO. Type 9s have trouble making decisions,
Mhm.
and I think of the word decision meaning to cut. And going back to that Grinch Who Stole Christmas, everybody being connected, to
Right.
cut, to make a decision, it means there's a disconnection, there's a potential rupture.
Yeah.
So 9s don't wanna miss out
Yeah.
because they want peace, harmony, don't wanna be disconnected.
Yeah. So what is the movement in a 9?
So nines go from sloth,
Okay.
and most nines hate that. And by the way, you might notice that these are the 7 deadly sins plus
Oh,
2 more. So
interesting.
each vice
Okay.
is a 7 deadly sin, and then there's also fear for a type 6, and there's also deceit for a type 3.
Okay.
So we'll get to those. But sloth, it's really a laziness to oneself and to one's own priorities.
Yes.
And so they almost numb out their own priorities so that they can merge with other people.
Okay.
So they have to actually remember themselves and their virtues called right action. And it's really about like prioritizing what's right for them.
Yeah.
That's why nines and twos look so similar
Yes.
because for you, it's about needs. For nines, it's about merging with other people's priorities
Yes.
and agendas. And what do you value and what do you care about?
Yeah.
And
I remember that talking to my mom about that mistyping. Like, she first thought
mhm.
she was a 2, but keeping the peace is really important to my mom. And I also wanna say about, moving from having a vice to a virtue and kind of what we're talking about right now, with a 9 and with all the types, it doesn't mean that a 9 is lazy in life. I think sometimes we
No.
hear this and it's
Yeah.
like, "Well, sloth, I'm not gonna have a career, or I'm not." I mean, my mom has had 2 incredible careers and is always
Mhm.
doing things.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's just like the 3, they're a heart type. So a 3, when I describe Boyd as putting blinders on and
Mhm.
getting work done, it doesn't mean he's not a warm, caring person. So
Mhm.
it's just, again, an invitation to dig into this even more. If you're listening and you're hearing some sense of recognition, there's layers to this, which is what I think is
Yes.
so beautiful about the Enneagram.
Me too, me
Yeah.
too. I have a story about my mom, and it illustrates this journey from sloth to right action. She was visiting me when I was living in New York, and I had an adorable apartment in the West Village, and it was really cozy. And one morning, I woke up and I was like, let's go out and take a brisk walk. Like, let's get some exercise, get our blood moving. And my mom was cozy and
Yeah.
comfortable in the apartment, and
Yeah.
she wanted to drink her coffee and read her book and stay at peace. So I could feel the stubbornness, the
Yes.
resistance. I could feel it in her. She was trying to make this decision. Do I go with Liz on a walk or do I stay here? And so she kind of was like, okay, let's go. And we went for the walk and we just saw all these sights, on 7th Avenue. And we got a coffee on our walk
Yeah.
and the birds were chirping and it was exciting. And we came back and she felt so much more alive and
Yeah.
present. And she pointed to that moment and she said, because I know I'm a 9 and I know I have a tendency to
Yeah.
want to stay asleep and to stay in my comfort zone, that I had to push myself out to do this because I now recognize that I'll be happier, I'll be more awake after. So
Yeah.
that's an example of what it looks like in real life.
I love that. That's such a great one. And it's great to know your partners, the fact
Mm,
you and your
mhm,
mom are in a close relationship, to know about each other's types so that you could have compassion for her in that moment. It's the same with my parents. My dad's a 7, my mom's a 9.
mhm.
So for the 7 to have compassion for when my mom wants to stay cozy, that whole story
Right,
could have been my mom too, because she
right,
wants to
right.
go, 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 go.
Yeah.
And for her to sometimes go, which she does. Sometimes she
Mhm.
meets him with that fun energy and goes and does the things, but other times she doesn't wanna do that because she's okay to
Yeah.
sit with more emotions than he is.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
So I have a story about a type 8 journey, and it's also in New York, but it's about my sister. And so the 8 journey is going from lust,
okay,
or also called excess, to innocence, or what I translate as a sense of wonder.
okay.
And so when we think of lust, a lot of times we think about like sexuality, but it's really about more, this sense of like excess, like I want more, I want more, I want it all. When Hamilton first came out on Broadway, we got tickets because I knew the music director. And so my mom, my sister, my niece, and I all went to see Hamilton. And this is when tickets were just exorbitant. We
Yeah.
were in the orchestra, we saw it, we all loved it. And my sister, and I think Hamilton, by the way, is an 8. So, like, his
Yes,
voracious
yes.
never being like, it never being
Yeah.
enough, his, like, constant writing, the song about not ever being satisfied. And so afterwards, my sister was like, "I have to see it again." And she was willing to pay whatever
Yeah,
price. And now Taylor Swift is coming to New Orleans this weekend. And so it's kind of the same thing. It's like, I will pay whatever
yeah,
it takes. I've got to see it again. And I could feel that sense of like lust excess, like
yeah,
give me more, 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 more. What I was thinking about was her virtue is the sense of wonder and the sense of innocence and like being able to appreciate one piece of sand in a whole beach,
yeah,
right? Like that's what the 8, they think that they need the entire white beach sand, but like
yeah.
really if they in a grain of sand, if they can appreciate the wonder of the world in that,
Oh, that's
that's what the journey looks like. So
yes.
I just tried to remind her, I'm like, we had the most amazing
Yeah.
experience and you get to carry
Yeah.
that forever. And she's like, no, give it to me.
What about the 7?
So the 7 goes from gluttony
Okay,
to constancy or sobriety.
okay.
I always think of there's a National Lampoon's, I think it's either European Vacation where the daughter is like, there's a full smorgasbord of food. And so, whereas 8s want more, 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 7s just want to try everything.
Yeah.
So, going back to that FOMO, they don't want to leave something untouched because maybe that was the best
Right,
thing.
right.
So there is a sense of like, I want all the options. I want to visit every country. I want to
Yeah.
taste every type of food. And what they end up missing out on is what happens when you stay with something.
Yes.
So that's why constancy or sobriety is the virtue. We see this in marriage.
Yeah.
So I do know 7s who have gotten divorced and moved
Yeah.
on only to find out that like challenges will be in any marriage.
Sure.
And so the beauty that comes from staying with one person, I'm sure your dad could speak to it with being with your mom,
Yeah. Yeah.
is all of the experience and the beauty and the joy and the fun and that he's been able to experience in one marriage
Yeah.
is the virtue of constancy.
Yeah. I've had a few wonderful 7 clients, but
Mhm.
one in particular who I just adore this woman, and she really leaned into yoga to
Mm.
find the stillness, and she is very aware of the Enneagram and was really using the Enneagram as a tool, but it was just amazing to witness her, like, really committing to that practice and
Mhm.
being with her emotions through the stillness of a body practice and letting whatever
Mhm.
is gonna come up, come up.
I'm glad you said that because when I mentioned that there's a heart type, there's head types, and there's body types, a lot of
Yeah.
times our growth journey is in a different center.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
for us, we're heart types, but getting into our bodies is really helpful for us to take action,
Yeah.
for us to grow. If you're a head type, you can get into your body or you can get into your heart. And
Yeah.
same with the body. For an 8, where it's just about go, 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 take action, when they get into their heart, their vulnerable, soft
Yeah.
heart, that's where they grow.
That is
So
the
there's,
truth. When you feel an
mhm,
8 in his or her
mhm.
heart,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
it's
yeah.
there's nothing like it. The vulnerability is so pure and it's so
Yes.
powerful. Tell us about the movement with the 3.
Yeah. So the 3 goes from deceit and or vanity,
Okay.
and it moves to honesty.
Oh,
And so what the deceit and the vanity means lying to themselves about what they're capable of
yeah.
and or not always looking at it. I know a lot of type 3s who are really great exaggerators, and
Yeah.
it's not that they're liars. It's just that they like see the best and they just want to spin
Yeah.
it in a way like my aunt is a 3. And my mom jokes that like wherever she goes, whatever country she visits or bag she buys,
Yeah.
it is the best. She's a real estate agent. She's so good at her job because every house, and it's not that
Yeah.
she doesn't believe it. It's like it has the best kitchen you wouldn't even
Yeah.
believe. And their virtue is honesty.
Okay.
And so a lot of it is about like what you're truly capable of. And you
Yeah.
don't need to do more in order to
Yes.
be loved.
Yeah.
Your being is enough.
Yeah.
It is lovable enough. And so that being honest with oneself about what you're capable of, who you really are,
Yeah.
letting down the mask because 3s are really good about performing. And so it's
Yes.
like being on and putting on the mask. It's sort of like taking that mask off and let us see who you really are and
Yeah.
know that you're lovable for that.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
such a beautiful invitation. I just wanna underscore everyone listening or most people listening are American or deeply connected to American culture. So to go back to our point earlier, that message, what you just said, is
Mm,
true for
mhm,
everyone because America
mhm.
is a 3. And so if we're
Right.
living here and we're living in this culture, I mean, that's the opportunity of a lifetime to be who you are,
Mhm,
but to
mhm,
be with
mhm,
yourself and your wholeness,
mhm.
and that's really tricky to do in our culture.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
I like that how that 3 can apply to everyone.
I have a type 3 client, and she's looking for love. She's in her early 30s now, and we discovered on one of our calls that she was like, "Okay, so what do I do? What's my next step?"
I'm laughing because that is Boyd. It's like the to-do list reigns in his world. Like, what do we
Yes.
do?
Yes. What do I do? Something's not working. What do I do? So as we're talking about it, I realized that she had all of these conditions of things that she needed to do in order to
Absolutely.
win
Yep,
the partner.
yep.
And so I'm like, "Oh, your job is to love yourself unconditionally and
Yeah.
to start noticing what conditions you're putting on yourself. Start dismantling all of
Ah,
those conditions that you're putting on yourself because at the end of the day, you want someone who likes you whether you look sweaty after a workout or like you're dressed to the nines.
yeah,
So that it's not about how you perform, but it's who you are on the inside.
yes.
Mhm.
Love it. So tell us about the 5 and the 6.
So the five's vice is avarice or what we know of as greed.
Okay,
And I wouldn't think it's so much in terms of money, it's a hoarding of one's resources.
okay.
So fives are very protective and boundaried around their time, space, and energy because this feeling is I may not have enough. And so I've got to hold on to it and I can't give it away and I
Yeah,
can't give you what you want because I might be depleted and they don't want that.
okay.
And so the journey is to non attachment from a real Buddhist perspective,
Mhm.
right? So it's like the open hand, having something in your hand and letting it come and letting it
Yeah,
go, knowing that the resource will always be there, right? So energy, time, and space are all sort of constructs that there's an endless amount of resources of energy. There's a really great show on Apple that's called Stillwater
okay.
and it's about this panda and he is a type 5. It's
That's
so sweet because he practices non-attachment in such a beautiful way and teaches these cartoon kids who live next door all about
that's sweet.
being able to hold what is and not have to hold on to it,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
hold with an open hand.
yeah.
So that's their journey.
And what about the 6?
And the 6 is from fear to courage.
Okay.
And so I think every human can relate
This is
to
another one,
fear.
yeah, this is
Yeah.
another one, like, I think perfectionism is so universal, I think the achievement of the 3 is so universal, and this aspect of the 6, it's all of us.
Yes. And people pleasing of a 2 is
Yeah,
universal as well.
yeah,
So the 6 fear is I'm not going to be capable. It comes down to trust, it comes down to faith and not trusting themselves.
yeah,
And so that's why they've got to be prepared because what if I don't have all of the protection? I think about hurricanes a lot with type 6s
yeah,
because that's a situation where as long as they know what they need to know, like if they know a hurricane is coming, they will be prepared and then they can trust.
yeah,
Then they can have faith. But that courage is inside of them.
yeah,
And they don't actually need to know all of the information in order to pull upon that courage
yeah,
of the heart. And they often are the most courageous types. So I have a type 6 dear friend who's a coach. She lives in LA. She left New York City and she lived in Joshua Tree for 6 months by herself in a little camper. And I
yeah,
can't think of anything more
yeah,
courageous and
yeah,
risky than being alone in the desert.
yes,
I was
yes,
so they have that capability of really being courageous and
yeah.
taking big risks.
I feel that same way with a 6. It's like you would
Mhm.
think that they would be paralyzed by fear. I've had this wonderful 6 client, the amount of inner work that she's willing to do, once
Mhm.
she gets in there,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like she will look at it, she will read about it, she will verbalize it.
Yes.
It's like, "Yeah, bring it on. I'm gonna look at this."
They are my favorite types to coach because they'll just go deep with me.
Oh,
They'll be
it's
like,
so
"Okay, give it to me all.
yeah,
I wanna see it."
yeah,
Yeah, and that fear, it's like if you can see it, then it's less scary, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with shame for heart types. It's like if you name it, then you can own it and you can realize that you're lovable for whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that facing their fear, feeling the fear and doing it anyway is their virtue.
Yeah. So I could listen to you talk about the Enneagram for 3 hours, needless to say, or more. We've done that with each other.
I know.
So I'm so curious because you have gone on, in addition to your Enneagram coaching practice and using the Enneagram so much in your work, you went on and studied human design. And I'm aware of our time, so we're not going to go into depth about human
Mhm.
design. But I think what I'm most curious about is just why add another self-awareness tool? Like, what was it compelling? And what is this thing with you, like your passion around helping people unlock themselves? Tell me
Mm.
more about that and tell me how human design plays into your practice and how it complements the Enneagram or is different from the Enneagram. I'm hoping that someone
Mm.
listening will hear something in this conversation that will motivate them to dig into both of these tools because
Mhm.
you and I share this. I mean, I really feel like both the Enneagram and human design have changed my life
Mm.
without a doubt.
Me too.
Like they've added so much quality to my relationships, so much awareness, so much choice, a word that you used
Mhm.
earlier.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
being aware of our time, but I don't want to leave you without understanding why add it? Why go study human design and what's that about for you and what's that about for your clients?
Mm. Well, my first response is why not?
Yeah.
Because all the self-discovery tools. I'll take everything. The Enneagram, as I mentioned, is about who you became to be, and so the patterns that you developed over time.
Okay.
And your human design is about who you were born to be.
Mm,
So it's a map of your energy and what you are here to give naturally. And I've
mm.
always been obsessed with the state of flow. You know, when you're just
Yeah.
like, you feel good, like synchronicities are happening, you're loving life, you like see with fresh, bright, open eyes. I love that feeling. It's spirituality. That's been my experience with it when I'm
Yeah.
in that state of receptivity and I'm in the flow of life and I'm just present.
Yeah.
And so human design for me shows me how to use my energy
Okay.
and how to give what comes naturally to me and then how to pay attention to the places that I don't actually have consistent access to. I may not be good at one thing. And if I try to, and maybe this is going to resonate with you or your listeners, when we see other people do it one way
Yes.
and we're like, well, I guess if I did it that way, then I could be successful too.
Yeah.
Going back to Lin Manuel Miranda, I was like, I wish that I had the ability to write Hamilton the musical and like have that success. But if I look at his human design, I would be able
Yeah.
to tell you exactly why he was able to do
Yes.
that. And I wanna know that for myself.
Yeah.
That's why I got into it because 'cause I'm like, "What are my special superpower gifts?
Yeah.
And then what are not my gifts, and where am I open to being susceptible or conditioned by other people? And
Yeah.
then how do I, like, practice being better at that if it's important to me, but also how do I let go of needing to make that my
Yes.
priority?"
Yes.
Mhm.
So I love that because human design, the way that it's come into my life is based on your birth time, place, location,
Mhm.
and it is a moment in time. And it really stands upon this idea that you are here with a purpose. You are designed
Mhm.
to be the way that you are. And like
Yes.
Enneagram,
Yes.
there's types to it, but just from my own personal example, because I think this will help
Mhm.
people, I'm a manifesting generator, and one of the things about that type is taking on a lot, following that gut feeling. The way that
Mm.
I make a
Mhm.
decision is very much from a gut feeling, which is a human design thing that you can learn about yourself. And so in that moment of me saying yes, it's all
Mhm.
great. Fill my life up. Yes, 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 yes.
Mhm.
For years, I didn't know why I wouldn't finish everything I said yes to.
Mm.
And it was
Yes,
through
yes.
human design that it was like a manifesting generator doesn't finish everything they say yes to. They
Mhm.
say yes,
Mhm.
and then they find more information and more information. And if you can sustain the energy, you can finish the thing, but you're actually supposed to let things drop off.
Mhm.
And I mean, to
Mhm.
the point where, Liz, I would be so critical that I couldn't finish a book.
Mm.
And not
Mhm.
fiction, because fiction can
Mhm.
really grip you, especially if it's a good novel. But the amount of nonfiction that I read It's like the last
Mhm.
20% of the pages. If I get another inclination to explore a different topic, I'm not reading. I'm not reading the last
Mhm.
20% of that book.
Mhm.
And I used to be ashamed, and now I'm like, "Oh, this
Right.
is just how I move through things. I'm fast, I wanna process it, I wanna move on. I
Yes.
don't need the
Yes.
last 50 pages of the book. I got it."
Right. And not making yourself wrong. I can be really good at making myself wrong and, "Oh, there's must be something wrong with me," goes back to my type 4.
Yeah.
If only I was able to do this, then I would have everything that I
Yes.
want. And so it helps me realize that there's nothing wrong, there's no mistake. And I guess to answer why I studied it and why the Enneagram and why I do this work in the world, and my biggest fear would be to get to the end of my life and realize that I didn't fully live the life that I was here to
Yeah.
live. And if everybody could really own who they are and be themselves, what a beautiful world we would have. And I think the main conflict that comes in the world is when we abandon ourselves. And that's what I care about. That's what I want to do more of. And model that myself, model
Yeah.
that for my children, for my clients, in my relationships with my husband and my loved ones, is to be myself and then show them that I want them to be who they are.
Yes.
Mhm.
Compassion,
Mhm.
acceptance. There's nothing more powerful than self-awareness.
Mm.
And really, it's the seed of change. It's the seed of
Mhm.
choice.
Right, right.
So, I'm so grateful for the work that you do in the world, and thank you for showing up for this community of listeners, and I will put everything in the show notes, how to reach you, that you are doing typing conversations with people to help people discover their Enneagram type. You're doing human design readings where you move through the human design chart with someone. I have personally had readings from you. I know you're so good at what you do. And I hope that some of the listeners will feel compelled to explore this more with you and just on your own. So we'll make sure to put some links of books and places that you can find out more about Enneagram and human design in the notes.
Awesome. Thank you, Paige. This has been so lovely.
It's the
I
best. It's
could
the
talk
best.
to you forever.
Thank you.